Hi, welcome to Black Cat Crafts. Our project today is one of my easiest to date. It's a dollar store rehab where I took a figurine of soccer playing Barbie and turned her into a zombie with her foot on a skull. What makes this project so easy? Well, we're keeping her mostly the way she is. We're just amping up her skin tone to make her look a little dead, adding a little blood and dirt, and then using a printable to turn the soccer ball into a skull along with a tiny bit of air dry clay. This whole project took me about a half an hour, and most of that was just finding the right size for the skull and the right paint and paintbrushes that I wanted to use. So let's get crafting. So now that we've got all of the supplies, let's start by adjusting her, which is truly cutting her leg off. I mean, we are in doing a zombie, might as well start with a little dismemberment. So I just used an X-Acto knife and a little bit of pressure to cut off her leg and then reattach it using Loctite super glue. Once it was dry, I moved on to step 2. Now, this step I chose to develop the bottom half of the skull. So on the toy, it was originally a soccer ball. You can certainly leave it, but I wanted to add an extra spooky element. So I took some air dry clay and just tried to smash it into the bottom. The skull is very round, but the portion of the jawline, the mandible, is very angular. So I wanted to poke a little bit of clay in there. This part was painstaking. The clay didn't really want to behave and I needed to get it wet. So that was what the paintbrush was about. It was a damp paintbrush, just re-wetting the clay as I was working it into the shape I wanted. Now you could get it into a skull shape and then paint it, but to make this easy, we'll move on to the next step, and that's a quick printable. So I just got some free art from the internet, so it's royalty free. Put it into a free Microsoft program that was already on my laptop. It allowed me to take off the background and then adjusted the size in Microsoft Word to be truly, truly tiny. We're talking, about a 1/4 inch wide. And once I got it the way I wanted it, it took a few tries to print it off nice. Some of the ink on my regular, I have an absolutely ancient printer, it smeared a little bit at first. So once I got it as the size I wanted, the quality I wanted, I used Mod Podge on both sides. And that's really important because otherwise it will wrinkle the wrong way. To form this onto that soccer ball with the clay, you'll want to have it bend the way you want. So get both sides wet and the water will penetrate it without running the ink. So let's zombify Barbie. I'm using a wet blend method that you see on screen. Wet blend is basically where you take a couple different colors of paint and you mix them right on the piece. I wouldn't normally do this, but she is a zombie and probably dirty since she's an athlete, so it's a technique that's suited really well for this. I am not being careful about the globbing the paint on. Again, we're looking for extra texture. We wouldn't normally do it this way, but she is a zombie and they're supposed to be a little gross, a little degraded, and so the extra texture adds to the effect. Same thing with the way the paint is not going on nicely on the plastic. I didn't do any kind of primer because I knew that the paint would bead, being a water-based paint. So this is just straight acrylic. The water-based paint, again, it kind of gives it that weird patchy decay look, and it makes this whole project so easy. It doesn't require artistic talent. It just requires knowledge of how paint behaves on a hard piece of plastic. Pretty cool. So while I let the paint on the legs dry, I'm going to add some dirt to her clothes. The clothes don't need a lot of adjustment, so I'm globbing on paint there. I actually had a brown paint that was starting to dry, so that was really great because when you glob it on like that, it looks like real dirt, but is a little bit more durable than real dirt. If I were going to use real dirt, I'd mix it with the Mod Podge so it had staying power. So that's what I'm doing here. I'm adding that congealed paint to her different places to make it look like dirt, to make it look like rotting flesh. You know, the goal of my project was easy, and this really, really helped achieve it in a wonderful way. You could see it going on the shoulder there. I just love how it just is so perfect. So continuing on, let's make those shorts dirty. Thinking about, all right, if you fall down, what parts of your white shorts get dirty? It's going to be a lot of the sides, places where if you fall, you're more likely to fall on your backside. So I did focus on that as well. And the overall effect is just better than I could have expected. So now that her face is dry, I'm going to think about it this way. We're adding zombie makeup. So that's not eyeliner. That is where her eyes are starting to get sunken in. So you want to ring the eyes with black. You don't have to be real careful in this part because you're going to paint her eyes red. So if it gets on the white, who cares? The only thing you want to do is just make sure that the black doesn't get too far under her cheekbones. But keep in mind, you can always add in a little white on the higher parts of the cheekbones, thinking about where you'd place highlighter or where the light shines. If you're not familiar with makeup from a high noon, it would shine high on the cheekbones. So now we're using the same method as before when we added the dirt to add the blood. We're adding blood where, imagining she bit somebody, it would have dribbled onto her shirt, and if she grabbed someone and got her fingers bloody, it would make her hands red. We're also going to think about the fact that her leg is broken, so we're going to add a lot of blood on her leg. Her knee is twisted backwards, so in a real world situation, most likely you'd have some kind of bone sticking out. So in this, you know, we're being glorified violence. This is a zombie. Of course, there's blood everywhere. So adding that in with a very wet red. I've added additional water to it to help make the look of the blood, the running blood, very authentic. Point of this particular piece is to make it easy for people who may not be experienced artists. So that's one trick you can do to achieve the look. The final painting step is to, of course, make her eyes red. Easy to do. I'm using the same red that I used for the blood and just dabbing it into the eye sockets. So once that's dry, I took a fine point Sharpie to make the eyes. If you have really steady hands, you can use a brush with a tiny bit of black on it. But for me, I felt I would have the best success if I did it this way. Now, the hair was kind of boring for me. She did actually have a headband on that wasn't colored at the factory, so I took a tiny bit of blue to add that in. I feel like this is extra credit. You don't really notice it. It's not something that you'll miss if it's not there. This was just more me being really picky. I've also taken a shade of brown that's ever so slightly darker than the light blonde and added some lowlights to her hair. So this is a textured piece, so the parts of her hair that are lower are darker. And this is the final look. She's stunning, and this was an easy project. This is Black Cat Crafts. Thank you for stopping by. I hope that you comment below, tell me what you thought about this piece, where would you display it, and of course, I hope to see you next time.